Hello, everyone. Microsoft announced SQL Synapse as a GA product in last December. And one of the interesting component or the feature which I liked very much is serverless SQL pool. And today I'm going to talk about the capabilities of server pool and show you some demos. So before we go with demos and go do a deep dive, let's understand how it is different from the usual SQL pool or SQL data warehouse previously. That's how it was known. So if you look at this, now you got a control node, and that's where your actually all your queries which you run is actually comes to the control node. Now, once it comes to the control node, it actually does all the various processing using a compute cluster. And once the data is processed in the compute cluster, it actually returns the result. So every node will return subset of the data which has been requested. And then the control node will go ahead and stitch it together and give it back to the application. Now, underlying for any compute in Azure is about Azure storage, and all this data is actually stored in the Azure storage here. So that's how the SQL pool or SQL data warehouse we are familiar with. Now, today the whole direction of the industry is to going serverless. I really don't want to manage an infrastructure. I want to kind of use it when I need it. Otherwise, I really don't want to burn dollars because of that. And here comes the serverless, and I think this is truly going to change how you actually derive analytics and insights from the data. Now, if you look at it, it's more or less same. Here you have the control node and the compute node. Now, the structure remains the same, but the underlying what you do, if you look at the compute node, is further divided into another compute node. Now, in serverless, you really don't have control on the DWU, and which is the kind of scalability unit in data warehouse, like DW 100, 400, 800, 600, and so on. But in serverless, all you do is go ahead and run the query behind the scenes without provisioning any kind of dedicated SQL pool. All you have to do is connect to the storage, run a SQL-like query. It will actually get initiated from the control node, which will further push it down to the compute node to do all the processing. And if it's a large data set, it actually can horizontally scale out, and it can further create further compute nodes. And once it actually starts processing in the respective compute nodes, bring the data back and give it back to the end user. So the benefit here is you don't have to provision a data warehouse. All you need to do is run a SQL query against a database storage, and it will be able to give you the data in a quite fast and quick fashion. So now it's the demo time. So I will go ahead and explain what Synapse Serverless is all about. Now, those who are not familiar, this is Synapse Analytics Studio, Workspace Studio. So you can go ahead and develop your codes, which can be SQL code, like running SQL statements. It can be your Spark, like you can go ahead and create a notebook and run Spark and process unstructured data. You can create ETL jobs using Synapse pipelines and many more things. But today my focus is on Synapse Serverless. So let's go ahead and understand what Synapse Serverless is. So you will have seen this data section where we have this workspace and link service. And in today's demo, I'm going to use the demo ADLS, a link service, which I've attached to this Synapse workspace. Now, inside the demo ADLS, I go to the demo one, and inside the demo one, I will have few files and folders, employee and Twitter folder, and a Bing COVID-19 data CSV. So how would you read this data? Previously, what you might have thought, okay, let me go ahead and import to a SQL table, right? It can be like, okay, I know Spark, so let me go ahead and process using Spark and create some Spark data frames. but life is much more easier now. So all you have to do is you click on this file, say new SQL script, and select top 100. When you go ahead and do a select top 100, and then I can go ahead and start changing it. I can make it from top 100 to another count star, so many different things. But what it does is it connects to the underlying storage, and it uses a new kind of function, open row set bulk, which has been introduced specifically for Synapse. Now, in the open row set bulk, what it does is it connects to the underlying storage using the serverless architecture of compute and scale out compute, control and the scale out compute nodes. And then it actually, when you submit the query, it distributes the data, does MPP, and brings the data back. But you don't need to provision a warehouse. All it will be done is behind the scenes, it's hidden to you. You will be charged based on the data processed by the query. So let me go ahead and quickly run this query. So it's going to give me 100 records from this Bing COVID-19 data, and it's fairly good, but I think it still needs a little bit of cleansing and prepping. So it gives the structure, it gives me the ID, updated, confirmed, and so on. But the field comes as C1, C2, C3. So if I would have specified that the first row is a header, so we can go ahead and tweak and make these changes and make it more user friendly or effective for you. But all in all, it actually went ahead, quickly read the data and bring it back. Now let's go a little bit more deeper and try to see how we can actually go ahead and do it in a real life scenario. To do that, we need to understand that you can authenticate and authorize access using a SAS token, right? So SAS token is shared access signature. So when you go ahead and do a shared access signature, you can specify the service, the resource type, what kind of operations you would like to perform, the start and the end, and request to get a SAS token for you. So I go ahead and generate a SAS token. It actually gives me a kind of a hexadecimal string, which has a specific format. But this is my token. If you want to put it in a security terms, this is my token with which it will understand that yes, whoever has this token can go ahead and read the data. So once I have the token, I go ahead and create a database scope credentials. With identity, I provide shared access signature and the secret, which is the token which I generated. Once I go ahead and do that, next is I want to read the data from a specific source. So you have to create an external data source where you specify the location. And in this case, I'm going to specify the storage account name and the container name. And along with that, I will go ahead and provide the credential, my SAS token employee, which I just created. Now, in previous example, the data was structured, but it's not formatted. Here, I want to do a bit more formatting. So that means I give header row equals to trues. And also I want to kind of pick few columns like ID, first name, last name, and city, and so on. So let me go ahead and do that. It takes few seconds. It will go behind the scenes, again, use the MPP serverless architecture processing and give the data back. And I can see, hey, I got James Butt who lives in New Orleans, Lisa Santini, McLean, and so on. While this is all about Synapse data, but you can also monitor and see how your SQL request is. So when I go to the SQL requests, and I select the pool as built in, it gives me the request ID, the pool, the file duration, and the data processed. And when I click here, it actually gives me the queries, the complete SQL statement. And when I go to the request, it actually gives more detail, like how the request actually came to the Synapse? When was it submitted? Who was the submitter? And what was the duration? I hope you learned about Synapse Serverless, and I will highly recommend to try Synapse Serverless in your environment. Amazing way to do ad hoc analytics, exploring data without worrying about the underlying infrastructure. In the next session, I'm going to talk about how Power BI and serverless work seamlessly together.